Hey guys, what's cracking? Godsman here, coming at you with another deck profile. Today we're going to be going over the brand new Fated One of Taboo, Zorga Nadir, for the Divine Z format. So this one's actually kind of a funny one for me because I wasn't planning on doing a Zorga deck profile to begin with. I'm not much of a Zorga goon at all. Yeah, I know, shock and awe, he's doing a Zorga deck profile, but he doesn't even like Zorga. Well, you see, that's a bit old news. I was doing the usual sleuthing of the comments section, seeing what new people were writing about because, you know, that's what I do. It's what I like about doing about YouTube. And I couldn't help but notice this commenter who wanted me to do a Zorga deck profile because he didn't know how to build a Zorga deck. And I sat there and thought, I too wonder how to build Zorga Nadir. So I took a seat, did the thinking man pose, and got to work. And after giving it the old college try, I came to the conclusion that Zorga is super fascinating and fun to playtest with, and I came up with not one, not two, but 3 different deck lists for y'all today. Yep, I cooked. But before we get into that, let me go ahead and set a couple of ground rules. First off, since we are doing 3 different deck profiles in one, which 80% of you guys seem to think is the way to go about it, so asking you shall receive, I am going to be abbreviating some things, so I won't be explaining in full detail what a lot of the old cards do, so don't expect me to give you the whole rundown on what a Roman Prison Dragon does. But as far as new cards are concerned, I will be giving the full explanation because it is mandatory in order to understand what we got going on here today. I don't expect y'all to be up to date if it's just a few days old, right? The second thing I want to note is this is not a scripted deck profile, so please forgive me if I say some ums, some likes, misspeak a few times here and there, but I wanted to get out something that was a little bit more hot off the presses, something for you guys to chew on, because I mean, obviously people want to play Zorga and I don't want to wait like a whole month in order to be able to give this triple deck list feature to y'all. So please forgive me if this sounds a little bit more casual. I mean, hell, if anything, I kind of prefer doing it this way anyway. It's a lot more natural and easy to get to you guys, so just bear with me as I do make some common mistakes here and there. I'm still trying my best. Anyway, with all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this deck profile. I've got some good stuff cooked up, so let's begin. Alrighty, before we get into the deck lists proper, however, we first need to take the time to discuss the big man Zorga himself, because by understanding the Vanguard, we can understand the decks. So, Zorga Nadir has these 3 lovely skills. First off, continuous on the Vanguard circle. When you would play a normal order, you can choose a normal order from your bind zone with a different card name and perform Alchemagic. This is already loads better than previous forms of Alchemagic and has 2 key benefits over previous versions. First off, it's much more stable. Normal Alchemagic requires you to use a card in the hand in addition to binding a separate order from the drop zone. This version, however, halves the equation on your part, letting you guarantee the second half of the Alchemagic with any card in the bind zone every single turn, thus requiring you to only make sure that you replenish the card in the hand and not have to deal with the drop zone whatsoever. Now, of course, compared to Zorga Mask, there is one downside, which is that Zorga Mask allowed you to use the same card twice over for Alchemagic, whereas this one, it has to be different names. But that benefit pales in comparison to the benefit of using a card in the bind zone over and over again, especially because there is a secondary benefit to that, which allows for one of tech cards to be way more viable. Let's say you had a 1 of Tearful Malice in your deck. You just ran it as a simple tech in case you needed resources. You can dump it to the deck from the deck to the drop zone with, say, Shadowcloak or something, right? And then bind it. Once it's bound, that 1 of Tearful Malice could result in 2, 3, perhaps even 4 instances of the effect, depending on how many turns you Alchemagic. That's the power of Zorga Nadir's form of Alchemagic. It lets you take any order and capitalize upon its effect several times over as long as you maintain it in the bind zone. That's very strong. Now, of course, you may be asking, well, okay, cool, but how are we going to get into the bind zone in the first place, Godsman? Well, that's where the second skill comes in. See, act on the Vanguard circle once per turn. You can Energy Blast 2 and bind a normal order from the drop zone in order to choose up to 2 cards from your drop. Calm the rear circle, and they get 5k power until end of turn for each normal unit with a different card name in your bind zone. However, at the end of that turn, you retire those units. This is ridiculously good. In addition to binding the normal from the drop, which is less of a cost and more setup for your Alchemagic, a mere Energy Blast 2 results in 2 bodies to the field of your choice from the drop zone, with a power up to boot. Of course, there is the unfortunate downside of them having to retire at the end of the turn, but considering that you still get 2 bodies for the turn anyway, that's a really goddamn strong break even. Furthermore, there are methods in Zorga to take those 2 bodies and convert them into hard pluses depending on the cards you run. So even though the immediate effect here is break even, they vicariously become +1s over time if you use other effects. So that's another way to make this skill really strong. And of course, depending on how many normal orders you have bound over the course of several turns, this power up isn't just 5k. It could be 10, 15, hell even 20. And that's not including their own skills, which could power them up even further. So you're bringing back some pretty hefty units, might I say. Between that and the Alchemagic, you're looking at some pretty sizable rear guards there. So yeah, this axe skill, it's very fundamental to the Zorga Nadir playstyle. You use it to get the order set up, but also subsequently afterwards, it gives you a strong toolbox ability and really good field presence. The field presence in this deck is even easier than other versions of Zorga, and it's just another reason why I consider Zorga Nadir to probably be the best version of Zorga to date. Now, there is a third skill, which is the Divine skill. It reads auto on the Vanguard circle. When this unit attacks a grade 3 or greater unit, costs Soul Blast 1, choose a column, and stand all of the rear guards in that column. However, again, at the end of the turn, you retire those units. Now, that may seem a little bit underwhelming. Even I would agree it's at least kind of boring as far as Divine skills go, but don't underestimate it. It hits like a truck, right? We have to keep in mind that the main form of pressure for Zorga Nadir is rearguard pressure, particularly with large numbers and inherent critical pressure. That means that it's going to be your rearguards that are winning the game, with those big crits and power. So what if you were just to swing and say, alright, so you dealt my roaming prison dragon with a bunch of cards in your hand, now can you deal with it again? That's the power of this Divine skill. If you know that the opponent can only handle a couple of your big attacks, being able to get a third one out there for a simple Soul Blast, oh my god, that could close out games super easily. You have to time it right though, because if you use it too early or too late, then it's just going to fizzle out and just be a whatever multi-attack. But the fact that it even is a guaranteed multi-attack in Zorga is so good, especially since we were crying for so long to have multi-attack in Zorga, and when we finally did, it was just, well, it was just keel severing, which, I mean, it's okay for mass, I guess, but it's far from guaranteed and takes some setup. This is a way easier form of multi-attack, and also way more powerful multi-attack, might I say, even if it's only a once per game skill. Furthermore, when it comes to this particular Divine skill, it's a lot like Reziel's in that you have to time it properly, and you have different benefits depending on if you shotgun it early or if you wait a couple turns to use it later on. And the 3 deck profiles that I've got for you today are all centralized on different tempos of Zorga. So with one, you'll want to use it immediately. With the second one, you may want to hold off a turn or two. And with the third one, you'll want to wait for as long as possible before using the Divine skill. But we're going to get into that later. Overall, it's still a pretty damn solid skill, even if it is a bit boring, but simplicity is strength in of itself. And as a whole package, Zorga Nadir is a fantastic and powerful Vanguard. I'm pleasantly surprised by how strong he is, all things considered, while also adding a lot of versatility and intrigue to the Alchemagic gimmick. Alrighty, so we're going to be starting off with the most stable and standardized version of Zorga, which I like to call mid-range Zorga. This version and every version afterwards is going to be running the same Rideline, which starts with the grade 0 Disastrous Slurper. This doesn't matter. It can be any grade 0 starter that you want. I just run Slurper because it's really in theme, and also, guys, come on. That name. I had to. Where things get real interesting is Abyss Fishing, which is the grade 1. So Abyss Fishing is the, I guess, replacement to Ranker Chain, if you will. It has the same cost, and it also similarly has some amount of dumping potential to it. But despite the debates that some people had, Abyss Fishing and the card that rides over him, Split the Preordained, is a better version of Zorga's previous Rideline. This may seem like a bit of a shocker because Zorga's previous Rideline was notoriously strong, being teched into lots of Stoicheia decks, and also being one of the first Ridelines in the game to actually give you an almost guaranteed +2. There were a couple other Ridelines that gave you +2s even back then, but they were not nearly as efficient as this one was, so it was always rather above the bell curve, and this one will also get you a +2 in most cases. So Abyss Fishing skill is that when it's rode upon by Split the Preordained, that's the grade 2, you Soul Blast 1 in order to look at the top 7 cards of your deck. Choose up to 1 unit card and up to 1 normal order from among them, reveal them. Put the revealed normal order into the hand, discard the revealed unit card and shuffle the deck. So this helps you fish out, pun intended, for your orders. And depending on the number of orders that you run, this is a fairly consistent skill. You can see like any order and add it to the hand. It doesn't even have a regardless piece restriction behind it, so you could straight up add the regardless pieces if you see it off the top 7 to the hand. It's very useful that way. But even if you whip that part of the skill, the part of the skill that you almost never gonna whip is the dump part, where it lets you selectively dump anything off the top 7. This is mission critical, as you do have access to cards that are very important in the drop zone, particularly Abomination, which is the new grade 2, which, much like Roaming Prison Dragon, it has a skill to revive itself from the drop zone, so dumping it as soon as possible is essential to making sure that you have early game pressure there for your grade 3 turn. So yeah, it's a really, really strong grade 1 Rideline. You could opt for Rancor Chain if you still like the simple Pot of Greed skill and dump the order, but this just has more versatility in where it's useful, and because the dig pressure is, well, not the dig pressure, the digging potential of the card is top 7, you have a way better chance of seeing the cards that you need off of it. So overall, I'd say it's an improvement. Please run it. The grade 2 is Split the Preordained. Now, Split the Preordained is more or less just Black Tear's Husk Dragon, but for Divine Zorga. It just adds a normal order from your drop into the hand, much like that card did. It even has the continuous rearguard circle effect to get 5k if you played an order that turn. So it is just Black Tear's Husk Dragon for Zorga Nadir. It's as simple as that. Please run it. If you're running a Abyss Fishing, you have to run this guy. And obviously we're going to be running one Zorga Nadir in the right zone, as well as one energy generator, which I'm not going to be explaining energy generator anymore because we're already on to set 2 Divine Sierra. So I'd expect a lot of you guys know what energy generator does, but let me just say it builds energy, which is the resource that Zorga Nadir uses. Enough said. Alrighty, so let's go into the deck list proper. Obviously, we're going to be running 3 copies of Zorga Nadir as well in the main deck for Persona Ride. This isn't any surprise. Persona Ride is key to seeing numbers and power, and also by riding you get a soul, which is good for the divine skill. Soul is actually not that hard of a resource in this version of the deck particularly, so you're not going to have a need to see Persona Rides to build up the soul, so it's mostly there for the power. You also run 1 Gratias Gradale, because again, Persona Ride is very good, and Gratias Gradale is an order, so obviously it's going to be able to have alchemagic potential. Of course, you can only use it once per fight, since it is a regardless piece, so don't be naughty and bind it and then expect that you can reuse it, because the once per fight clause is also on the card, so you can't get around that restriction. So nope, you only get it once. Now let's get into the rest of the orders. So our other grade 3 order is Fill the Skies, O Brand of Corpses. So this is the new Zorga order, and it's a hell of an order. Its restriction is you can only play this if you have a Zorga with Divine Skill. You choose one of your Vanguards, and it gets continuous on the Vanguard circle. All of your rearguards placed from drop this turn get power plus 5,000 until end of turn. Yeah, so TLDR, this is pretty much a superior version of Clouded Miasma's power boost. It doesn't get the revive like Clouded Miasma does, but between the 2 revives from Zorga Nadir, as well as the effect of your other cards, which call themselves from the drop zone, you're usually looking at anywhere from 10,000 to usually 20,000 power game holistically, all for a free order. That's pretty damn nifty, especially if you choose to bind this card and therefore it's going to stay in the bind zone and be that passive bonus in any other order you choose to alchemagic with it. It's a 3-up for that reason. I really want to see this one in particular because it's the reason why you're able to push some of the big numbers that you can, along with Zorga Nadir's revival skill, which gives them a lot of numbers, and then the other cards which get a lot of numbers. You guys know how Zorga works. That part of it has never changed. This just adds onto that element of the strategy. So we're going to be running 3 of it because we really want to see that card. Next up, we're going to be running a couple of grade 2 orders. 2 copies of Gather Upon Me, Ye Wandering Souls. Yeah, it's a Zorga deck profile, and Ye Wandering Souls is pretty much just as good as it's always been, if not better. This card is a really good one to bind, because as long as you keep it in the bind zone, what you then therefore have to do is just discard 2 orders from the hand. You use one as part of the alchemagic, and then you pitch the other one. So it's really easy to be able to pay for that discard an order clause with this one, and you just keep getting a drive on a Zorga Nadir. Yeah, drive pressure, really good, and just going to make a spoiler alert right here, we actually do run front triggers in this deck because we want to maximize the offensive potential of those drive checks. So 2 Wandering Souls is just the perfect ratio. I run a second because it is decently useful to see. You could run one of it if you want and just dump it with a Shadowcloak or something, but 2 is better, especially since you could just discard one Ye Wandering Souls for the other. Now, another 2 is my Tearful Malice. Tearful Malice is just a 1-of here though. You retire 2 rears, and then you get all of the resource generation of it. It goes to the soul, countercharge, draw a card. This is a more mid-range version of the deck, so we do want the potential to get some critical resources if it goes into the late game. But probably the most important part of Tearful Malice is the draw part. Being able to draw a card is good since a lot of the orders in Zorga don't actually net you card advantage. Even Ye Wandering Souls is more of a break even if anything. So this actually getting you a straight up draw is super nifty. Yes, you have to retire 2 rear guards for it, but some of your rear guards just stay on the field after they're revived from the drop zone, so this is the perfect way to reset them into the drop zone so they can be called out again. It's only a 1-of, so you only really dump it for those just in case situations, but even for that alone, it's pretty damn good. Finally, we're running 2 copies of a Grade 0 order. Yeah, this is Rousing Rasp. Rousing Rasp requires you to counterblast as the play cost. When you do, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 card with grade greater than or equal to your Vanguard, reveal it and put it in your hand, and discard the rest. This is here simply because I want to dump cards. Whether it's a target for revive, or it's the self-revivers, or it's the orders to bind from the drop zone, there are a lot of cards that you want to see in the drop zone, and pitching them from deck into drop one at a time is pretty cool and it's pretty precise, but it's pretty difficult to be able to see exactly what you need on turn 3. With Rousing Rasp, you just get to mass dump and expedite the process. It's really damn useful, and there's not a whole lot of cards in this deck which actually use Counterblast. So the Counterblast here is not too much of an issue for being real about it. There's only a couple cards that Counterblast in this deck whatsoever, so you should be able to pay for it. Ideally, you want to use it as soon as possible, which starts at grade 2, because that's when you'll have a damage available in order to use the Counterblast effect, and then from there, you'll be able to just start milling out and turboing the pieces that you need to see in the drop zone. One thing to note is the card that you add is grade greater than or equal to your Vanguard. So once you're at grade 3, the only things you're going to be adding off of this are other grade 3 cards, which aren't a lot. So once you get to grade 3, you're probably, unless you see like a lucky Persona Ride or something, it's mainly just for the dump to turbo out. There's actually a card here which requires you to have 10 or more cards in the drop zone for its power boost, so it's pretty useful to get turboing to that extent. As a matter of fact, so let me just get you quick math here. So Philander is the name of the card I was just referencing. He's the one that makes you require 10 sorry, I'm stuttering there. He's the one that requires 10 in the drop zone in order to get 10k power. With Rousing Rasp available, you actually have 10 guaranteed as soon as you activate it. The way this works is you discard a card for grade 1 ride, that's 1. Then you discard a card for grade 2 ride, that's 2. You Soul Blast with Abyss Fishing, that's 3. You discard a card off top 7 with Abyss Fishing, that's 4. You play Rousing Rasp, which at bare minimum is 5 because you dump 4 and dump itself, or if you happen to miss, then that's dump 6, which is 10 on its own. But even if you add 1, that's dump 9. And then you call the Philander, who dumps 1 off top 5, and then that's 10. So as soon as turn 2, you've guaranteed, with the Rousing Rasp and the Rideline, you've guaranteed getting Philander to the 10k power boost. This is super useful if you're trying to rush down the opponent early, especially if you're going first. That's 18k on its own versus an 8k Vanguard. That means without any boost, it's able to beat past defensives. So for early game tempo, this is ingenious. The only other thing about Rousing Rasp is that it does taper off in the late game because this version of Zorga isn't really focused on getting more than a few cards in the drop zone. We're going to talk about a mill Zorga that actually is concerned about getting a lot of cards in the drop zone later, hint hint. But for this version, it's just more for the early game consistency than anything, so that's why I only run 2 of it. Okay, now on for the units of the deck. We're running 4 of the brand new Grade 2 Abomination of Impending Karma. So good old Abomination here is, for better or for worse, a roaming prison dragon, but as a Grade 2, and it has these 2 skills. Auto, when this unit is placed on rear circle, costs Energy Blast 4 and bind a normal order from drop, and this unit gets power plus 5,000 to end of turn for each normal unit with a different card name in your bind zone. That is a really expensive skill. You're only going to be using it once per game, if at all, so you only do this if you intend for this guy to be the column that you restand with Zorga's Divine Skill, TLDR. If you don't do that, then no worries, there's a couple other ways to Energy Blast in this deck, so yeah, only Energy Blast 4 if you're really certain you're going to be using that power up. Second skill is the important one. Auto from the drop. At the beginning of your battle phase, if you have a Vanguard with Zorga in its card name and Divine Skill, and you did Alchemagic this turn, you may call this card to rear circle. If you call this card and your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this unit gets critical +1. Yeah, super useful skill there. With this skill, you have a roaming prison dragon, which, albeit unless you use the first skill, is going to be 5k less power than roaming prison dragon, but you get a 5k interceptor, which is useful because this is mid-range Zorga, so it's focused more on being able to lay out a pretty strong offense but have a backup plan in case things go awry. So I'd say this is better. Of course, one issue with this card is it does require the opponent's Vanguard to be grade 3 or greater to get the critical, so you don't have the blowout potential that Zorga generally does with the roaming prison dragons, where if you put this out against a grade 2 Vanguard, it's going to be bad news bears for them. So you'll have to wait until they're grade 3 or greater, which is much like what Zorga Nadir's restand cost is anyway. Because of that, you may argue that it's actually better to go second with Zorga, and I wouldn't even doubt it. You get extra draws, and the energy generator gets more energy right off the bat. There's a lot of benefits to going second with Zorga, so if the ball's in your court there, you may want to opt to take it that direction. I mean, hell, the Philander's being able to beat them up is another reason why to go second, so do consider that. Anyway, it's a really good card, and I run as a 4 because you definitely want to see it, because 2 of this guy is going to be ideally what's in your front row every single turn. So yeah, there we go. Oh, and one last note before we move on. The bind a normal order from drop, where you use the Energy Blast 4 cost, is fairly useful because it helps you rack up more normal orders for Zorga Nadir's power-up skill when he double revives from the drop zone. So if you really are just trying to go for maximum numbers, chaining this and then also having Zorga Nadir's skill next turn will get you a lot of power bonuses over those couple turns, so do consider that. Anyway, the next 4 of we've got is Sea Rebel Brave Shooter. This is the Energy Cycler. Now, Energy Cyclers, I suppose I will explain this one because it is like a Divine Z era card, so it's worthy of explanation. When he's put on the Guardian Circle from hand or discarded from hand while riding from the Ride deck, you Counterblast 1 or Energy Blast 3 and draw a card. Yeah, super useful, just what you think it is. Funnily enough, if you're trying to use the Impending Karma's Energy Blast 4 skill, you may opt to Counterblast for this draw skill instead. And that's totally viable, because there's only one other Counterblast card aside from Rousing Rasp and this guy that even uses Counterblast. So you definitely could have some CB open in order to use this skill at any point of the game. Really fair play there. The second skill is Auto. When it's placed on the rear circle, if you Persona wrote this turn, cost Counterblast 1 or Energy Blast 3, yes, it's the same cost, choose a grade 2 or less normal unit with a different card name from this unit and without Sentinel in your drop, or an order card from your drop. Put in your hand, choose a card from your hand, and discard it. Yeah, this is so good. It lets you trade 1 for 1 with any card in your hand for a piece that you need. Most generally, I'm going to be using this in order to get back an order from the drop zone to the hand. Because again, even though you don't care about any orders in the drop other than the bind zone, right? You still care about having an order in the hand to start the whole Alchemagic process. So this will guarantee any card in your hand to be an order of your choice. That's super critical. Another way you could take it is you could use this card in order to dump pieces from the hand, like an Impending Karma. So if anything, the discard might be more useful than in its cost, so that's super useful. And because he doesn't need to be placed from the hand to the rear circle, you can revive it with Zorga Nadir to set up the card in your hand. So what you will do, if you don't have Alchemagic available, you Persona Ride Zorga Nadir, you play your Brave Shooter from the drop zone, and then you use Brave Shooter skill to get the order card in the hand, and then you Alchemy Magic. To me, that's probably the most useful aspect of the Axe skill, is you could just use it before the Alchemy Magic to set it up, so it's a real game changer in making Alchemy Magic easier for you. Sea Rumble Brave Shooter, just a really easy 4-of, gets you card advantage, it helps secure your Alchemy Magic, it does a bit of everything for you, and the cost is very versatile, so just pay what you think is the least expensive cost depending on the game state. Finally, for grade 2s, we've got 2 Shadowcloak. So Shadowcloak is an oldie but a goodie. It just lets you dump orders from the deck to the drop zone. It's definitely the best way to get orders there aside from Rousing Rasp. Generally, if let's say you had a Rousing Rasp and you also had Shadowcloak, you'll want a Rousing Rasp first, that way you see what orders you dump off the top 5, and then afterwards you call the Shadowcloak in order to dump whatever isn't there. Let's say you Rousing Rasp and you ended up dumping the Obranda Corpses. You may then go ahead and dump a Ye Wandering Souls from the deck to the drop zone, or maybe a Tearful Malice if it's going to be one of those more grindy games. He's very versatile that way. Furthermore, with this card, you can add back some defensive pieces from the drop zone to the hand, because when you revive with Zorga Nadir's Axe skill, you can then Alchemy Magic after the fact. And with that, you can then take one of the cards you initially revived and bounce it back to the hand for a Soul Blast, which, Soul Blast, not expensive. This card, along with Zorga Nadir, are pretty much the only 2 things that Soul Blast in your deck. How handy. And with Tearful Malice, you can get back Souls, so you may keep on cycling this back. The only thing about Shadowcloak I don't like particularly is, because he's a grade 2, he's not boosting, and he's not even that powerful of an attacker, but on the first grade 3 turn, your card, Impending Karma, is not that useful if you're going first, because he's not going to get the critical. So you may very well just start attacking with Shadowcloaks, or 15k attackers, and thus ironically stronger than Impending Karma, because none of its skills power it up unless you're willing to pay the Energy Blast 4 cost. So note that Shadowcloak is more of an early game card to set up your process and also get you some crucial pieces to help defend yourself with back to the hand. But in the later turns, just dump him. Don't even care about him. That's why he's only a 2-of. Also, I will say for Shadowcloak, if you want to, you can keep him in the back row, just so you can keep on having that cycle back to the hand even on future turns. I wouldn't recommend it because you'll want to end the game by like turn 4 or turn 5, but if you know that your opponent is super grindy, you may have to take it that direction. So overall, pretty versatile card, and you could bump up the copies, but I just opted to run 2 of because it seemed perfect for how tight the deck list was. On to the grade 1s. So Conceited Noble Philander. This guy is really nice. So I already talked about the 10k power, so I don't need to explain more about how that operates and how Rousing Rasp makes that super dummy easy to get off. But I will say that the dump off top 5, equally as important potentially. It lets you drop Impending Karma, lets you drop any orders you may see, it lets you drop all sorts of crap. So yeah, overall, really good card and a pretty easy 3-of all around. Next up, we've got kind of an interesting one, because I don't see a lot of people talking about this guy. This is Bripopper. So Bripopper came out in DBT 13, and essentially TLDR, what he does is when he boosts your Vanguard Zorga, you can counterblast 1 to choose a normal order from your bind zone and put it in your hand. This effect is so bonkers, because it means that by binding cards you bind cards, right, in order to get the Alchemy Magic going. So your concern now is that you have to get a new card from the order zone, not the order zone, you have to get a new order into the hand. This lets you take the card that you bound, and during the battle phase, add it back to the hand, so that on the next turn, you bind a different order from the drop zone of Zorga Nadir, and then use the card you recycled to the hand as the card in hand for the new Alchemy Magic. And then, because you're reviving 2 cards with Zorga Nadir, one of the cards you can revive is just Bripopper again, who cycled this over and over and over again. So because of how Zorga Nadir's Axe skill works, you essentially have guaranteed Alchemy Magics every turn as long as you see 2 orders. If you see 2 orders in the game, period, and Bripopper, he's guaranteed, dude. It's so crazy, and it's just for a counterblast. So if you do want to maximize on Bripoppers, you may not be using Rousing Rasp more than once anyway, and you may want to use the Energy Blast and Sea Rumble Brave Shooter, so use the resources as you see fit. I guess, again, Tearful Malice for countercharge, do keep it in mind. But yeah, this is definitely a super important piece to me personally. I think that this card on its own, combined with Zorga Nadir, makes Alchemagic a joke of a condition. It's super easy now, so that's why I run him at 3 of, because I want to see him at all times. You could opt to make it a 2 of if you're not too concerned about it, because you only need C1. And no, you can't use it multiple times in a turn because it needs to boost specifically your Vanguard Zorga. So again, no shenanigans for you. But yeah, still super useful card. I love this guy. Finally, we've got 2 Unwavering Maiden Yolanda. Yeah, here's another interesting one. So when Yolanda boosts on the rearguard circle, you can retire 2 other grade 1 or less rearguards to draw a card, and this unit gets 10k power until end of that battle. This is insidious in a deck like Zorga Nadir, because Zorga Nadir will call any 2 cards from your drop zone, but then they have to retire at the end of the turn, right? So for instance, cards you would probably return from the drop zone to the field are going to be boosters, because the cards you'll be attacking with are your Abominations and Impending Karma, which revive themselves, so it would be redundant to revive them with Zorga Nadir's effect. So you'll be reviving boosters like Philander, like Bripopper, or perhaps if you're really desperate, some trigger units. Yolanda, after they're done boosting, by boosting with her, you can convert those 2 cards that were going to die anyway into a free draw and additional power, meaning that you took what was effectively a break even and turned it into a hard +1. She's brilliant that way. I love this card in this deck, so much so that I debated putting Bripopper to 2 and her to 3, so you can parse with those ratios however you want, but man, Yolanda's the shiznit in this deck. And honestly, you could probably play it in most versions of Zorga if you just want some added draw power. It's a very one-size-fit-all card for this kind of deck. So yeah, I'd heavily recommend trying her because she was one of the more niche aspects of the Stoichaic card pool I came across, and I've not regretted putting her into the deck ever since. Okay, now on to some of the staple obvious stuff. Obviously, we're going to be running 3 PGs, right? Just play whatever one you think looks cutest, and 1 Elementary of Sanctitude. You're playing a grade 3 Vanguard, so you get to play Sanctitude. Oh, the joy. And because it is an order card, you could actually dump it with ye old Shadowcloak if you want. And because it is also an order card, you can then, after dumping a Shadowcloak, return it to the hand with Sea Rumble Brave Shooter. So that is actually a way to effectively add it from deck to the hand. How about that? It's really nifty. So not only is it useful in any deck that isn't grade 4 deck, it's super useful in Zorga, who can search it out. Then your triggers. We're going to be running 8 crits for them being Alana. It gets you soul and a little bit of power, so that's useful. You could always opt to run just 8 5k crits if you want, because 5k is a way more useful number than a 4k booster, and you may be in a situation where you have to do that. So deal with it as you will. Maybe run 2 Alana would be better, and then 6 normal crits. The other triggers we've got 4 normal heals, because I don't like effect heals. I don't think effect heals are all that great. I know some people really like them, but it's just personal preference. Maybe you might want to opt for the effect heal that gets an extra shield boost if your opponent has units with crits, because in the mirror match, that's definitely going to be useful. But aside from niche cases like that, I just opt for the 15k shield and go on with your day. Also, we've got 3 Frenzied Eras, which is the effect front trigger. Your attack patterns are good for front triggers. Whether it is that you're going for a 3 attack turn, in which case you would attack with your Vanguard first and then give the front to the entire front row, or you're going for the Divine Skill turn, you're going to be able to maximize the bonus because the Divine Skill is going to restand the column on attack. So again, that's going to be 3 potential units getting this 10k power up. So overall, really good stuff there. Finally, for the overtrigger. The overtrigger is a bit of a complicated decision because you have 3 overtrigger choices that are all really good. Bless Favor gives you a lot of versatile benefits like extra draws, more power to the front row, heals, all that good stuff. You have Eidos Faro, which lets you add back orders or Persona right from the drop zone and gives you a 9 crits, so that's pretty dang useful in of itself and furthers your game plan in several aspects. But I opted for Volnute. And Volnute is really insidious. So with Volnute, if you check it and you put it on one of your rear guards, well, suddenly that rear guard is going to be swinging for 100 million twice with a critical. So when debating between Volnute and Eidos Faro, or probably even Bless Favor, the debate is, oh, okay, would you rather take the extra crit now with those 2 over triggers or take 2 1 damage attacks with Volnute? But in Zorga, you basically get to have your cake and eat it too, because it's not 2/1 damages for 2 damage. It's potential 2/2 damages for 4 damage total. So the amount of value you get with Volnu is pretty insane. And again, the Zorga skill to restand is on attack, not end of battle. So the restand column that you utilize can also take the Volnu restand skill. So yeah, you might be getting a 5 attack turn there, and 4 of those 5 attacks are with crits. So your opponent, if you check the overtrigger, they might just give you the handshake right then and there. It's really damn powerful. So yeah, that's going to be it for the mid-range Zorga. Definitely good options for defense, offense, being able to build and see your pieces, and just have an overall very stable game plan. This is the most stable version of Zorga. And if you wanted a version of Zorga that I would say could reliably take into at least, you know, casual play or something, or hell, even if it's like, if you're confident in it, you could even take it up to the top tables in BCS or something. I think this deck is pretty good. I would say mid-range Zorga is the best way to take it. But there are a couple more deck lists I'm going to go over right now, and if one of them takes your fancy, well, I mean, hey, that's good. Okay, so next up we've got Beatdown Zorga. This version of Zorga is, I think it's actually the first one I built, even for the mid-range one, surprisingly, and that's because it just felt inspired with this one. So let's go over some of the stuff that's the same. Your Rideline is the same, so Energy Generator, Abyss Fishing, Split the Preordained, and Zorga Nadir. You're still running 3 Zorga Nadir and 1 Gratias Gradale. You're also still running 3 copies of O Brand of Corpses. So yeah, again, this order just really good. You're also still running 2 Rousing Rasp. So this order also really good. And we actually see it in all 3 versions of the deck, because just dumping cards from deck to the drop zone, it helps you see the cards that you need to see. So enough said there. Now let's get into some of the new stuff. We're running another grade 0 order at 3 copies, Blessing to the Flowering Buds. This card reads that until end of turn, all of your rear guards with original power 5,000 or less gets power plus 10,000, and when this unit attack hits, you may return this unit to the hand. Yeah, so there's some synergy here, might I say, because what inspired this is I noticed on the some of the gameplay videos that I've done with Zorga Nadir. I've only done 1 fight night with it that's actually been posted, but I've seen some gameplay with Zorga Nadir off on the side offline, and one of the most tragic things is when you have the revive triggers from the drop zone, because that's all you see. This turns that weakness into a strength. So we're going to be abusing some cards in Stoicheia that has 5k bases to maximum effect, and this makes for some really big beatdowns. Ironically, despite the fact that you're going to be running a fair bit of 5k initial power cards, this has the most explosive power numbers right off the bat. As soon as turn 3 goes around, you can beat down the opponent. So much so that if you went second, you may be incentivized to actually just immediately use Divine Skill if you think you got game right then and there. It's that potentially devastating. So let's go into the units proper. So first off, we're running 4 Roaming Prison Dragon. Yeah, Roaming Prison Dragon is more preferential here compared to Impending Karma for 2 reasons. One, it's faster because you get the crit even if the opponent's grade 2, and as I said before, you may actually very well kill them while they're on grade 2 with this version of the deck, so that's better. And also, Roaming Prison Dragon, funnily enough, has 5k base. So if for some reason Roaming Prison Dragon is just chilling on your field, and you haven't been able to get it back into the drop zone, then your Blessing to the Flower Buds will be able to give it 10k and the self-bounce skill if it hits. So that's pretty damn useful. Ideally, you want to revive it with its own skill, and when you do so, it will miss timing with the Flowering Buds, which is an unfortunate side effect of this strategy, because Flowering Buds gives a static 10k to all the 5k or less units that's currently on the field. It's not a skill given to the Vanguard, so Roaming Prison Dragon will miss timing with it. But if it happens to be on the field, then it won't miss time with it, and you may lose a crit, but you will gain a self-bouncing RPD that still gets 10k just through a different means than its own skill. So yeah, just more inherent synergy there. We're running 3 Shadowcloak in this version of the deck, just because we definitely want to see our cards as soon as possible. So it gives you a lot of consistency there. You can opt to run less Shadowcloaks here. I just decided that it would be good to make sure that we see the Blessing the Flowering Buds and the Fill the Sky O Brand of Corpses, which, by the way, that's your ideal Alchemagic. Your ideal Alchemagic is combining Flowering Buds with Brand of Corpses for the maximum power gain possible. Secondly, you're going to be running 3 Sea Rumble Brave Shooter. It's for the exact same reasons that it was before. It helps you recycle orders. It also helps you get extra draws if you need to see extra draws to see your pieces. So yeah, a lot of good stuff. Now, here's a cool card. We've got 3 Grade 2 Ralina. So why am I playing this card? Well, that's because Ralina has 2 skills, and one of them is glitter locked. But the one that isn't glitter locked, thereby the one that you can use, is act on the rear circle. If you do not have a Momoke token, you can counterblast 1 to call a Momoke token. And what is Momoke token? Well, Momoke token is a 5k base token unit that lets you retire 1 or more of your other rear guards to get 5k power until end of turn for each unit retired for this cost. This is super nifty. Sure, you don't get the whole back row attack thing because that's glitter locked with Roa, but what you do get is a card that lets you wipe your whole field, which means those RPDs that are stuck on the field, yeah, Momoke can eat that for power, so it's a powerful booster, and it can also eat Ralina, meaning that Ralina goes back to the drop zone, and that's yet another 5k. So it eats a lot of cards to be a super huge booster, and that's super useful because if you put it behind an RPD, that's a massive column. Just think about it, right? Let's say you retired a couple units of Momoke, that's an extra 10k. And then with Flowering Buds, that's an extra 10k. And then on top of that, it's going to be boosting an RPD, which has an extra 10k from its own skill, and then it gets an extra 5k from O Brand of Corpses. Oh man, it's starting to stack up quickly, right? And if that wasn't bad enough, you could then take that column and restand it with a Divine Skill, meaning that it's 2 instances of that massive power up with a critical. So Momoke is potentially your ideal beater. And because you're running Roaming Prison Dragons, as long as Momoke survives through the opponent's turn, on the next turn you can re-up its axe skill and reset your RPDs to the drop zone. So it's perfectly synergistic. And even if they do get rid of the Momoke token, all you have to do is revive Ralina from the drop with Zorga's skill, and then she's going to call another Momoke token back. And then Momoke will just eat up the Ralina along with whatever is left over on the field. It's super synergistic, and it resets your drop zone and just has all the power that you'd want from a 5k booster, because 5k is the name of the game here. So yeah, really, really useful card. So useful, in fact, that I'd even considered it for other versions of Zorga just because Momoke just is super good for refreshing, but I opted against it because deck space is really tight, and this is still kind of a gimmick at the end of the day. But it's super useful, guys. I'd suggest trying it out other versions if you just want to see if it fits more to your playstyle. Then, of course, we've got Willem and Taria's Sanctitude and 3 normal PGs. That's the same as ever. So let's go on to other grade 1s. We actually got a couple of unique grade 1s here. We got 3 Nectar Fairy Q-Tile. This is a pretty damn new card. So Nectar Fairy is going to be released in DZBTO2, so the same set as Zorga Nadir, and it has this skill. Auto, when this unit is placed on rear circle from the hand, if you did not play an order this turn, you discard a card from your hand, search your deck for up to 1 order card without Regardless piece, so sorry, you can't use Gratias Gradale here. You discard it, and then it gets the effect to be able to be played from the drop zone, and when it would be played, put it on the bottom of the deck instead. So let me just TLDR that for you. You pitch a card in order to send a order from deck to the drop, and then you get to play it from the drop, where it recycles itself back into the deck. So you can turn any card in the hand into an order. So it's a lot like the same ideology with Sea Rumble Brave Shooter, but it doesn't need Energy Blast or Counter Blast to do it. It just does it whenever you place it from the hand. Which, yes, being able to be placed from the hand, that is a little bit of a downside because you can't revive it and use the skill, but it's just another way to get consistency with that, because we're not actually running cards that recycle our orders back. So if you notice, that's why I still place a lot of importance on Shadowcloak, Sea Rumble Brave Shooter, and now this guy. You could opt to do the Bripopper, but the Bripopper is a little bit tough here because the Bripopper is a booster, but you want your boosters to be 5k bases because that's where you maximize your power lines. Because that's where you maximize your power lines, Bripopper is unfortunately dissynergistic with this particular version of the deck, so I opted for other means in order to make that happen. Finally, for the grade 1s, we've got 2 copies, which honestly, it could be more if you wanted to, and I'd say go for it. We've got 2 copies of Sylvan Horn Beast Hedge. I think that's how you pronounce that name. It's a weird name. It's a 5k base grade 1, so obviously the synergy is there, right? And it has one simple skill. Auto on the rear circle once per turn. When your other rear guard is placed, this unit gets 5k power to end a turn. So yeah, just a simple 10k booster that will then get 10k from your Flowering Buds, and then if you revive it from the drop, it'll also get another 5k from Veiled Disguise over Anna Corpses. Brilliant. And then it'll also get more power because Zorga Nadir is going to be giving it 5k increments depending on how many normal orders you have in the bind zone when you revive it. Even more brilliant. It's just a lot of power all at once, and it's going right for your opponent in the face. So yeah, just 2 of this guy. You can run more if you want. It's just a nice 5k booster that synergizes perfectly with the deck's ideology. Now for triggers, the only difference here, because I still run normal heals, I still run Volnun, I still run the 3 fronts, the only difference is that I actually did opt to run 8 normal crits because the 5k is the name of the game, and you don't need soul in this version of the deck because the soul is just as easy as it was in the previous version of the deck, except this time I'm not even adding in that element because you want to end the game sooner rather than later. So who cares if you burn all your soul by turn 4? You shouldn't be going to past turn 4. Ideally, you want to use Divine Skill and kill by then. So this is a very, very fast and aggressive version of the deck. Of course, you're going to want to add a Momoke token off to the side, because if you don't have a Momoke token, then what are you doing, right? Ralina is useless without it. You only need 1 because Ralina can only call Momoke if there isn't a Momoke, so just have the 1 over off to the side there so you can summon it. Yeah, so that's Zorga Beatdown. This version is the quickest version, and it's probably the funniest version, because not a lot of people, I think, were thinking to take this direction with the Stoicheia card pool, but man, is it really funny, especially since there was one time where I did this deck, and I actually killed an Ignis player while he was on grade 2, and then on the next game, I killed him because he went to grade 3 first, right? Yeah, too bad. I just decided to use Divine Skill on that one and killed him while he was still on regular Dradual. So even with or without the power boost from the Divine Skill there, where you can get an extra attack, it doesn't matter. You can beat them down and just ask for all their cards right off the bat. It's really brilliant and really fast. But of course, it's not for everyone's cup of tea. But God's man, I hear you cry, I don't want to play the hyper fast quick beatdown even if 5k number is funny. I want to play Zorga over the course of a few turns and build up to a super devastating win condition and feel like the mastermind that I always am. Ah, well then, I present to you Mill Zorga. This version is still going to be running the same Rideline as all the others. Abyss Fishing, Split the Preordained, Zorga Nadir, and Energy Generator. Oh, and Disastrous Slurper. Let's not forget about you. Next up, in the main deck, we're still going to be running the 3 Zorga Nadir and the 1 Gratias Gradale. This is particularly important for Mill Zorga because the deck is going to be sticking around for a few turns, so you'll want to see those Persona Rides for maximum benefit. Now for orders. We've got a couple of return suspects, which is O Brand of Corpses and Rousing Rasp, but we're actually running 3 Rousing Rasp and 2 O Brand of Corpses. That's because Rousing Rasp's ability to mill a bunch of cards from the deck is more important in this variant than it is in the other 2 variants, so you'll want to maximize on that and see it as soon as possible, right off the bat. O Brand of Corpses, meanwhile, is only a 2-of because despite it being a pretty useful, powerful card, it can just be sent with Rousing Rasp at some point or another, and you only need to see 1 to really use it well, so you only need 2 of it in this case. The other 2 new orders that we've got here is Regurgitation in the Underworld and Nectar of Sensationalism. Starting with Regurgitation, this one lets you retire any rearguard on the other side of the field and call 2 cards from the drop zone. That means that not only do you get to pick off a pesky rearguard, which is super useful for a deck that needs to stick around because that pesky rearguard might put an end to your machinations before you see them to fruition, but reviving 2 cards is useful in a deck like this where we actually have a couple cards that let you mill or build additional resources specifically when they're called, so that'll help you turbo out even further. Finally, Nectar of Sensationalism. This is potentially the whole point of the mill strategy. With Nectar, you get 5k power to a rearguard for every 5 cards in your drop zone. Then if you have 15 or more, you get a critical +1. This is a key power-up card because our main finisher for this deck isn't Impending Karma nor is it RPD. It's actually Fleet Swallower. Fleet Swallower skill lets you get a 5k power bonus and a Battle Door skill for its battle as long as you pay a Soul Blast when it attacks. That means that with Nectar of Sensationalism, you get a card that has a huge power line with a critical and Battle Door whenever it attacks. Furthermore, with the Divine Skill, as long as you can pay that Soul Blast and 2 Soul Blasts from Fleet Swallower, which TLDR, I've made it to where you can, you get to use this effect twice over. And furthermore, if you keep filling the soul, you can even do it on turns that aren't the Divine Skill kill turn. In this variant, you want to wait until the very end of the game in order to use this Divine Skill, because that lets you maximize Nectar Sensationalism's power lines. After all, even though you only need 15 in order to get the full benefit, if you dump to 20, 25, 30 cards, that's even more power to let Fleet Swallower get the job done, and more reasons for them to waste PGs for 2 card guards to the Guardian Circle. It's a very devastating combo, but it does take some time to see to its full potential, which is why we're going to need to grind out a little bit more and also get as much mills in there as quick as possible. And on that note, we're going to be running 3 copies of Inheritance Maiden Hendrina. This card, when placed on rear, lets you discard 3 cards from the deck. Then you can retire it in order to not pay Soul Blast costs for your Alchemagic. This card is here because it gets you cards into the drop zone really quickly. As a matter of fact, you can combo with Zorga Nadir and Regurgitation of the Underworld for a 10 cards to the drop zone play. Here's how it works. You play Hendrina, you discard 3. You retire it, which means you don't have to pay for Soul Blast anymore. But that's not even really the important part. The important part is you then call it back with Zorga Nadir. You mill another 3. That's 6 cards. Then you retire it again. Again, this effect is redundant. It's just there so that you can go ahead and abuse it. And then you use Regurgitation of the Otherworld. Return it back to the field. That's another mill 3. And then you can retire it again, and it becomes the 10th card in and of itself. So just like that, you've achieved a way in order to get 10 cards just like that, which is 10k from Nectar Sensationalism on her own with a combo with Regurgitation of the Underworld and Nadir. And it's also just another way to make sure that Philander gets that 10k off the bat, which, spoiler alert, we will be running 3 Philander. Now, for other grade 2s, I actually did decide to run 2 Abomination and Impending Karma. This is going to take a while to get to the Fleet Swallower win condition, and you may not be able to pay for 2 Fleet Swallowers on either side of the field. So you'll use Impending Karma here as the other guy on the other spot in the front row. Of course, I'm only running 2 of him because he's not as important in this version of the deck, and since you're going to be milling a lot of cards, sooner rather than later you're going to be able to see him in there anyway, so he's not too mission critical to keep at really high amounts, but he is still useful for his critical and also the potential to get a lot of power in case you're trying to put your opponent in a catch 220 situation when it comes to which guard they need to guard and which one they need to take. Now, Sabermal Wraith Shooter still makes a return here, but he's just at 2 copies, and it's just for all the same reasons he's been in the other ones. He's good at resourcing, and he has good added consistency to your overall game plan. I already mentioned him, but we got 3 Philander in this deck list because Philander is good. He benefits off your mills just as much as it did in the regular Zorga by getting 10k, and he helps with your mills because he dumps off pop 5. Bripopper also makes a return. This one lets you counterblast one to add back the order from the bind zone, just for a quick refresher, and in a deck that's going to be around here till maybe like turn 5 or turn 6, depending on how long you can hold out, this is definitely going to be useful to ensure that you can keep on Alchemagicking as much as you can. The counterblast is a little bit more complicated here because Regurgitation is an added element of counterblast to this deck, and you're going to be incentivized to use Rousing Rasp more than once potentially in this version, so that's yet more counterblast. So do be careful about that when you're trying to afford Bripopper. That could get in the way. Finally, a new card. We've got Romantic Bloom Pentalence. This one, when it's placed on rear from the drop zone specifically, lets you soul charge 1 and give 5k power. This is how you're going to be able to pay for your Fleet Swallowers every turn. Furthermore, because it's getting 5k power for it to be a 13k booster, it's a really, really nice number with Fleet Swallower, who's a 10k base, and it gets increments of 5k from there. If that wasn't enough, by soul charging and thereby soul blasting them with this combo of Pentalence and Fleet Swallower, you also have an interesting way of getting more cards from deck to the drop zone, just through that 1-2-3 step maneuver. So it is yet another way to build up towards Nectar Sensationalism. It's all very synergistic and nice. Our other tertiary cards are just the same as it's always been. 3 Honeycomb, or just any PG really. You've got 1 Elementary Sanctitude, because good cards are always good. You've got 4 and then 8 criticals. You can run Alanas if you want. Alanas are more important here potentially because it gets you into the soul, so bada bing bada boom. If you wanted an excuse to run Alana, here's your excuse. You get 3 Friendly Zeras for your front trigger as it's normal. You got your 1 Volnute because Volnute never goes out of style as long as we got crits on our rears, and Elegy Pixie, which is just my normal heal. Just pick any normal heal you want. And that's going to do it for the mill version of the deck. Again, just to reiterate, you'll probably want to wait on the Divine skill until the last turn possible. When you think you can't survive another turn, you need to go all out, that's when you use the Divine skill, because that's going to be when your Fleet Swallower reaches its apex with its Nectar Sensationalism. Super devastating deck list. Of course, you are going to be a little bit reliant on seeing the Soul Necessary, so definitely make sure you have your Pentalaces and your Alanis in the drops over this version. It's super fun and insidious, and once your opponent realizes what's going on with Fleet Swallower and the Nectar Sensationalism, they're going to get a headache, and you're going to smile because of it. Enough said on that. And that was all 3 of the deck lists. Which one did you guys like the best? Personally, I think Midrange Zorga is the best of these 3, but when it comes to the fun factor of it, I think the Mill Zorga is potentially the most entertaining one to do, because it gives you something to work towards over every turn, which is a really fun way to play in my personal opinion. But I also see the charm of the 5k Beatdown Zorga just because it makes you seem like a clever bastard, so it's super cool that way. Either way, all these versions of the deck are pretty interesting and offers a lot of versatility in different ways to take the overall strategy. So I hope you guys found something interesting from at least one of these 3 decks, and perhaps inspires you to give Zorga a try too, because I heavily recommend it after all the play testing and experimentation I've done with this fella. He's super cool and neat. That's all I gotta say on that. Anyway, if you did like this deck profile, then be sure to check out my other deck profiles down below. I did one for Rezio otherwise, and I think the plan is to get on to Welstra and Vargas and all the rest of the Divine units, so if there's a Divine skill user that you're waiting for, then don't fret, I'll get to it rather than later, I think. It's just that Zorga and Rezio came first, because that's just how the cookie crumbled, I guess. Anyway, if there's other kind of Vanguard content that you are looking forward to, then go ahead and subscribe to me and turn on the notification bell for that. I do uploads on top 10s, discussions, fight nights, the whole shebang, so there's a lot to look forward to. And with that, take care, God bless.